Leviathan, a novel written by Darius Hinks, published by Black Library, and read by me, Uncle Grim. Chapter 1. The Fortress City at Xerax, Samnium Province, Regium. The Tacticarium had been carved from burial chambers. Chiss, eld from catacombs that snake beneath the city. Auspex shrines and cogitators, now obscured by most of the walls. But in the few places, fragments of sacred art were still visible. It mostly showed tree roots snaking down from the world's surface and encasing its core, cradling it in a nest of tendrils. But more recent editions depicted the Lieutenant Bear's his sword trailing leaves rather than flames. Was aware of the chamber sporting a crown of knotted, but his attention was focused entirely on the chamber. Once a site of prayer and sacrifice, spooling from one of the full of quiet industry, then carefully tore some off, processing the information within human speak. And calm officers. The symbols conjured images of dressed in smartly pressed uniforms rather than knifing through the void towards the outermost reaches of the servitors scuttled spider-like over logic engines. He thought of his brother and tracing their fingers over strips of vellum fixed to their armor, reciting blood-sworn oaths. The thought quickened his pulse, and he wished, more than anything, that he was with them in this mission. Across from him, Brother Librarian Zuthus Abrams stood at the center of the room, watching images projected from a domed hollow-table, while a third Ultramarine, Brother Sergeant Tanaro, was standing nearer to Castamon. Scattered around the rest of the room, dwarfed by the three Ultramarines, were dozens of humans, senior militarum officers and their aides, all wearing starched regimental finery. Further back, scurrying through the shadows, making adjustments to the stacks of logic engines, were red-robed adepts of the Adeptus Mechanicus. "How long?" asked Castamon, dropping the parchment. "The strike force is approaching the edge of the system now, my lord," said a helot, staring at the view screen. "The deep void returns are faint, but we can just about place the ships." He pointed to a cluster of faint dots hanging over the hollow table. "They'll shortly be passing the moon of Crassus." Castamon gestured for the militarum officers to come closer. They obeyed his silent command, some trying to catch his eye, but most trying to avoid it. He tried to imagine how they saw him. As a monster, probably. He was huge, of course, like any space marine. 3 heads taller than a man, his skin was dark and weathered, and head was shaved, displaying 3 scars that raked down over his skull. Fat, silvery gouges left by a predator's claw. His blocky jaw was edged with a short silver beard. His eyes were set deep under an anvil-hard brow. He did not seek to intimidate, but he was comfortable with the fact that he did. There was a few who could hold his gaze for long. He recognized all the officers, and they would have been surprised to know how well he knew the details of their military careers. Castamon was a warrior. He had no interest in politics, least of all human variety. But he approached his posting on Regium with the same rationality and diligence he applied to everything else, remembering the words of his Lord Commander. "Fortify your mind with study, prepare for all outcomes." As he scrutinized the faces, he recalled facts gleaned from data crystals and genealogical tracks. Rather than soldiers, he saw allegiances and rivalries, flaws and obsessions, depths and hopes, every shade of human frailty. They looked proud and determined, trying to hide how nervous they felt in his presence. They were good people, whatever their failings. They had endured. They had survived long enough to see silver in their beards and feel aches in their bones. They were the exceptional few. "The next couple of days will test them." The words formed telepathically in Castamon's mind. There was a time when he could have found the experience distasteful, repulsive even, but the voice was familiar now, the voice of a friend. He looked over at Abram. The librarian's suit of battle plate was even larger and more impressive than Castamon's. His head was buried in a thick ceramite cowl, and his armor intricately inscribed, covered with runes and horned skull designs. He stood statue-like, towering over the humans. The lower half of his face was hidden behind a rebreather, but his eyes were visible, and they shone fiercely as they focused on Castamon. He was gripping a force axe larger than any of the humans, a magnificent relic, worked with the same runic design as his armor, shimmering with the same light that spilled from his eyes. Castamon noticed with faint amusement that none of the militarum officers were standing near him. He thought. The ships are closing in on Crassus. Tiger says he had to locate his prey. And while he hunts, discontent spreads. You saw the crowds outside. They are scared. And scared people make dangerous decisions, Governor. Surak is too tolerant. You know my thoughts on the matter. Surak is a good man. These people can police their own homes. You confuse lambs with wolves. Surak is not equal to the task. None of them are. They need answers, that is all. Answers only beg more questions. Abram would not usually address him in such an abrupt manner. He sounded almost bitter. The librarian had been in pain for over a week, and, though Abram would never admit it, Castamon suspected his pain was growing worse. Pain was rarely a consideration for the Adeptus to start his warriors, but Castamon knew this was not a physical suffering. It was something beyond his understanding, something linked to Abram's esoteric skills. He needed to pursue the matter, but this was not the time. He wanted the soldiers out of his command bunker as quickly as possible. He looked around the room. Governor Sarek asked me to speak to you, but I will keep this brief. We all know why we are here. This is panic and hysteria on Regium. Nightmares are spilling into people's waking hours. There is a resurgence of the separatist threat. Despite our labors in the spring, the separatists have a new creed, preaching of cataclysms and supernatural beings. But let me tell you this. There will be no cataclysms. There are no such supernatural beings. And the separatists are merely opportunists, seeking to regain a vestige of their former power. The cause of the nightmares is biological, not spiritual. It can be measured, combated, and reversed. This planet-wide hysteria stems from a foe that my battle brothers and I have encountered before. People want to know why the Ultramarines are leaving Regium, one officer said, his tone brittle. That's one of the main catalysts of the current panic. Perhaps if we briefed people beforehand, we would have allayed their fears. Castamon looked down at the man. We are briefing people now. He pointed to the planet hovering in the air near Abram, drawing their attention to a swirl of red lights that was approaching it. The anomaly you see near Crassus is not a natural phenomenon, nor is it a warp storm. It is the remnants of the Xenos fleet. Some of the officers frowned as they studied the shapes, while others whispered to their aides. It is a fragment of an alien armada known as the Hive fleet Leviathan, Castamon continued. It was first spotted several months ago, fleeing past orbital shipyards and Hydrafer in the galactic north. The warships of the Navis Imperialists dealt with some of the aliens, but a few stragglers survived and fled south. We can only surmise what drove them this way, to the west. Perhaps they were savaged by another Xenos fleet, or by void-dwelling predators. Perhaps they were scattered many years ago by the emergence of the Great Rift. We may never know. But a few survivors are now skirting the outermost borders of this system. Some of the officers shifted in position, and the others cleared their throats, about to ask a question, but Castamon raised his hand for silence. The creatures belong to a recognized xenotype, the Great Devourer, Tyranids. Little is known of their origins, but our chapter has waged war against them and other systems, and I can tell you this. They have no connection to the forces seeking to overthrow the Emperor. The heretics who attacked us in the spring sought to breach the Sanctus line because they wished to invade the Sol system. They sought a route to Terra. But the Tyranids are different. They are driven only by senseless hunger. A strategic defense measure such as the Sanctus line is beyond their comprehension. Everything we know about them indicates that they are species purely bestial species predators. They have no inkling of this planet's tactical importance. However, he paused. As they skirt the edge of this system, they will be drawn to Crassus. He nodded to the planet to the edge of the system. A vast world rich in biomass, a place where they could feed and reproduce. My apothecary biologist, an expert in the dark matter of Xenos, believes they will be unable to resist it. He paused, looking around the room again. pleased to see the concentration on people's faces, which presents us with an opportunity we cannot ignore. These abhorrent Xenos cannot be allowed to taint our border with segmentum solar, and thanks to Crassus, we have a chance to stop them. We can prevent them advancing any further from the galactic west. Crassus will be like a beacon to them. Their attention will be focused entirely on it, so they will be slow to notice this. He pointed to another shape on the hololith, a cluster of blinking white arrowheads heading towards Crassus. At this very moment, my battle brother Lieutenant Tyrus is leading a strike force to cut this canker from the void. I have assured my superiors that these stragglers will come no closer to Holy Terra. Tyrus is a warrior of great renown, and he is accompanied by 2/3 of the Ultramarines stationed here on Regium. An elderly officer spoke up. Which is exactly why panicking, my lord, sending a majority of your Ultramarines off-world seems reckless. What if heretics attack us from the void again? Like the Sanctus line is always a target, and that's why you're here. If the heretics know we've lost so many of our Ultramarines, they will see a chance to attack. Castamon noted. The same concern was voiced by Governor Serac. My original plan was to lead my entire force to Crassus, but you have observed, Regium is always a potential target. So after much thought, I've decided to remain here with 1/3 of my garrison. If there are any more acts of piracy or orbital strikes, we shall have no difficulty dealing with them. Strike Force Crassus will be heading back within a matter of days. The Tyranids will be eliminated quickly, and a full garrison will be restored here. I have assured Governor Serac there will not be a prolonged engagement at the edge of the system. An elderly officer shook his head. You were deployed here to protect Regium, and as you said yourself, the aliens out near Crassus are few in number. Why did you have to send so many men? Why did you have to send any men at all? Asked another officer. Why not report the matter so it could be dealt with by someone else? From what you described, the Xenos threat is insignificant. Insignificant? Some of the soldiers paled as they heard the warning in Castamon's tone. You betray your ignorance. Images of bloodshed filled his mind. I have seen worlds devoured by a single Tyranid swarm. They do not threaten. They do not bargain. They have no interest in wealth or power. We are not to them but meat. If I allow them to leave this system, they will spawn. They will thrive. They will consume. His words were followed by a troubled silence. Then one of the officers spoke up, his expression rigid as he battled to meet Castamon's gaze. Governor Serac sent us here to discuss the rioting and insurrection, but also dreams and the madness. What does that have to do with aliens at the edge of the system? Castamon was impressed by the man's nerve, but he replied in a tone that made it clear this was a briefing, not a debate. My apocryphy biologist has theorized that the Tyranids are behind the psychosis. There is much he cannot explain, but under his underlying logic, it's sound. I have seen this happen before. Whether it is intentional or not, the presence of Tyranids in the system induces hysteria. The man looked incredulous. People are burning manufactories because something that's happening on the other side of the system? People are burning manufactories because even from here, even from light years away, they feel the hunger of the great devourer. Castamon looked at the red lights pulsing blood-like above the table. They are unfathomable. They are your nightmares given form. He waved at the V-shaped group of arrowheads. And we will grind them under our heel.